Namaste. Welcome to the Conscious Convo podcast. I am your host and teacher, Pippa Leslie. I'm here to share everything I learn, see, and channel. This podcast is for the conscious and curious beings who are ready to dive deeper into spirituality. I am so grateful you are here. Hi guys, welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here again for this next episode. So I am joined by Inbaal Honigman, and before I introduce her and let her speak, I just want to give a shout out to the Crystal Point, which is the spiritual shop in Hamilton here where I now live. Me and Michelle have built up a really amazing friendship, and we're working together, and she's sponsoring the podcast. We're actually releasing a podcast episode every month for her and her shop. But if you are in the Waikato area in Hamilton, wherever you are around here, please go and check her out. She's got everything you need, all the crystals, all the oracle cards, loads of spiritual stuff in there, and reach out to her. I'll put her link in the show notes. Now, as you all know, I've been doing this podcast for 2.5 years, and I've rebranded it twice. And I don't know why I'm saying this, but obviously I'm saying it for a reason. And I just feel like I go with the flow. Like I've wanted to rebrand it because I'm moving into something else. I'm evolving and I'm changing, and things that I want to talk about changes. Now, it used to be Beauty is Found Within, because you all know I'm a Disney fanatic. Then it moved to Mother Earth Rising because I was very much connecting to nature at the time. Now it's the Conscious Convo. So if you are listening, I would recommend going back to like the first season from episode 1 and just seeing how different I sound and how much I've changed in those 2.5 years. Even when I do it, I'm like, oh my God, like my audio, and I was nervous and like not as confident. But I think I'm saying this because Inbaal has given me a lot of confidence as well, like especially having readings with Inbaal, and she's so knowledgeable and amazing. So hi, Inbaal.
Hi, Pip. I'm so excited to be on this with you from the other side of the world.
I know, it's crazy. It's been a crazy wild journey the last year, and I know you were on it with me. I was separated from Chris, and you were so helpful. You gave me loads of details to contact people, and it all worked. It all worked. And just as a little kind of message on the sideline, if anyone's listening that knows a journalist in New Zealand that can help me with getting my story out and my message, please reach out to me on Instagram or on Facebook, just because I'm kind of putting out messages wherever I can. I'm calling it in, and Inbaal knows this, because I do want to get my story out there, and I'm full of knowledge. And I think if I don't get this knowledge out, it's just going to stay within me, and that's not what it's for, is it? So I know you're full of knowledge, Inbaal, and I can't wait to hear more about your story. So you do a lot of psychic readings, and you are a psychic, and you do tarot, don't you, as well, which I never really fully got into tarot because I didn't understand all the cards. I've got a tarot deck and I love them, and what I like about tarot compared to oracle, tarot are quite direct. But oracle are a bit more like, oh, it could be this, even though they're great and they're lovely for messages. Tarot's like gives you the direct,
it gives you
this
the
is
skinny.
happening.
Yeah, absolutely. The tarot doesn't give you any barricades to hide behind. It tells you exactly what's going on. Now, I'm incredibly passionate about the tarot because I'm a very direct person myself, and I do a lot of readings by email, which sounds really commonplace to anyone under 40 watching, but 23 years ago, when I just started doing readings by email, it was rare. It didn't happen. And us elderly would go through the entire transition of putting our voice into the email format that had no tonality, and that you couldn't really sort of smile while you're doing it. You just had to write down the words. And the tarot really translates itself very well to that, because the tarot is the same. It has no expression. It is like, this is happening. You're going to get this phone call at that time. Whereas oracle cards do have like the full rainbow of emotion and relatability. And I work with oracle cards very little, because as a psychic, I'm a very results driven person. I've always charged by the hour, and I like to know that you can stand up and walk away from a half-hour reading, or if you're on a budget, 20-minute reading, getting exactly what you need to be getting, and with a plan of action that will move you forward. However, and I think this is an important distinction to make, it really is what it is in the hands of the psychic. Because if you've got the tarot in the hands of a fearful psychic who might give you a kind of message and not fully commit to it, then that's what you'll get.
Yeah.
I've known psychics that would work only with oracle cards because they love the artwork, and they would give you absolutely between the eyes, and you'd still get it. And I actually used to have that. Now we've got the tarot, very direct. We've got oracle cards, much softer, and then we have comedy cards. What are comedy cards, you might ask yourself? A long time ago, about 20 years ago, I used to have like a little comedy psychic troupe with a friend and an ex, and we used to market ourselves as comedy clairvoyants at the time. And at that place, it wasn't really as big of a hit as we thought it would be. We thought it would be hilarious, that people would love it. It turns out people were kind of confused. They were like, are they clairvoyants? Are they comedians? But what I used then as a prop, I took the death card, and I took the death card from an old like Swiss deck where it's really sort of a skeleton with a scythe where, no punches are pulled. And I photocopied it and laminated it 13 times. So I had a deck with 13 death cards, and that was my comedy deck. And I would take it on our little comedy clairvoyant Johns and would give readings with it. And they were still absolutely valid readings, because when you're reading it, see, because you're saying, oh, I couldn't really remember all the cards. You don't need to. If you look at the artwork, and if you look at the way that each card relates to the card next to it, you can ascertain so many connections. You'll get words spoken to, because I know that you, the same as me, you'll just hear the words, and and it'll be obvious to you what the message is. So even with my comedy deck, that was a ridiculous idea and an even more ridiculous execution. That was still enough of a tool to give a full reading. And when you take it even further, that's when you can give a reading from a crystal ball, because there's nothing in the crystal ball. What are you giving a reading from? Well, your psychic is seeing a whole bunch of stuff there. And that's how you can take that skill or that belief and look at somebody's astrological chart and see stuff there that is like in proper astrology, and then go, this is really interesting how this line goes across that line. I feel that means something totally new. Yeah. And that will be right as well, because all the tools are just tools in the hand of the psychic. And so when you call me a psychic, a part of me kind of cringes, because I think, not that good. It's only the cards that are really doing all the heavy lifting. But that is a lie, and that is my issue to work on, because it is in the skill, in the ability, and I think more than anything, in the passion for people, in the passion for transformation. And again, I know that's something I share with you, because you love transforming people as well.
I think for me, Oracle for me was just a bit of a guideline for doing readings, and part of me would use the cards as a bit of confidence boost, because I think if I was going to have an intuitive session with someone, to just intuitively connect to that person and not have any cards to kind of direct you. For example, one of Kyle Gray's decks, the Angel Guide, you know, like a card would come out about transformation, and that would lead me down like an inspirational message around transformation. So, you know, they do give you a bit of guidance, but I think with tarot for me, like, I can stare at a tarot card. I mean, I actually haven't done my cards for a long time, as in I've got like 30 decks in the cupboards behind me here. Chris and I used to do them all the time. We were separated just to give us some, you know, inspiration and love. But I used to like pull my tarot cards and I'd sit and just stare at the image. And then, like you said, Inbaal, I'd have like words, feelings, emotions, you know, that would come up for me. And I think everyone should own a couple of decks, because when you need some inspiration, you need some guidance. You know, like you said, the cards do the heavy lifting, but we're just messengers. And for me, with transformation, for me, I've always said to my clients, my hope for you is that you don't have to keep coming to see me. You know, I want you to go away and have the tools to do self-healing, to go and do your own readings, to trust your intuition. I said, I absolutely love that you come to see me, that you want readings with me, and I love helping people. But ultimately, you have all that within you, all of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you saw it as inspiration, because before the cards were used for fortune telling, they had a use for inspiration. When the first deck of tarot was created from an Italian game called Tarocchi, an ornate deck was created to commemorate the marriage of two Roman families, and those decks of tarot were used to inspire the court poets. So if they would write a poem for the lady of the court and then would get writer's block, or would be stuck on what the next thing is that they could say, they would pull a card to help them out of that writer's block. And in fact, one of my old students, not old, she's younger than me, one of my students from long ago was a poet, and she called it Tarot Poetics.
Oh, wow.
And it's incredible. And each of the poems is based on a card, on a collection of cards. This is a very long time ago when she had a day job, and since then she's got about 20 something books out and is now like a full-time author. But that little flyer is still such an honoring of the history of tarot, and bringing it like into a modern era in the way that it was intended in the first place. Because in a lot of ways, not everybody's into prediction. Yeah. And I used to know psychics who would just not do prediction. And I was always kind of funny about it, because I think, well, that's really the bulk of my job. I love predictions. I am an organized person for Pisces. I like to be prepared. I want to know when I'm getting pregnant, when my house will sell, how he feels for me. I need to, I've got a life to live. I need to get on with some facts. So I adore prediction, but it's not for everybody. And some people will come for readings really just for the inspiration, to see what their options are. I adore it when somebody says to me, can you just see what my gift is? Because that's so open-ended, and it's so in tune with the universe. Do you know what I mean? So you're not plotting things, you're letting life happen. I envy those people. When I grow up, I want to be those people.
Well, when you said about predictions, it took me to that book with Dolores Cannon. Nostradamus, he made those predictions, didn't he, back in the day? And tarot's been around for what, over 1,000 years?
A little under 1,000 years for tarot. Yeah. Almost 800, but different methods of prediction. Sorry, because you said Nostradamus, and I'm thinking,
I've got a Nostradamus as well.
Yeah, I think I have a copy, but like in Hebrew. There we go.
He made lots of predictions, didn't he?
Yeah, I have one book in Hebrew. as you can see, it's still fairly untouched. But it's here for when I need it. And some Nostradamus predictions come back into the press like a couple of times a year when there was all sorts of news from the royal family. There were Nostradamus predictions quoted in the British media, and when the unrest started in Russia and Ukraine, there were predictions from Nostradamus quoted in the media. So I think even the most skeptic part of society, the press, will still sort of give a time of day to anything that's, established enough, anything perhaps that is male enough. I wonder if Nostradamus was actually Nostradamus, if she'd have got as much as many column inches.
Yeah, because that's what Dolores did. I think she was channeling him, or she was downloading messages from him. And it just, obviously I've not read a lot of his work, but I do know that he did a lot of predictions and a lot of them have come true. I think it mentioned before the pandemic, he actually predicted COVID would happen and things like that. But I think that again is linked to astrology as well. And astrology has a big part to play, doesn't it? With your star sign, your rising sign, like, I believe you were born at the exact right moment you were meant to be born. You chose people who are premature. I mean, I was 3 weeks premature. I should have been a Scorpio baby, but I wasn't. I was a Libra. I think I should have been Scorpio. I was 30th of September and I was 3 weeks early, so I still might have been Libra, actually. Maybe. Yeah. I
The
don't
3 weeks early, you would have still been Libra, but your moon sign would have been very different.
Yeah.
Presumably, the ascendant would have been quite different, and all of the different aspects within your chart would have been different. Now, what's really interesting in astrology is not just the time that you were born, but every day all the planets are doing their thing. They're doing lots of crazy things. And so predictions for upheaval and for world events can be fairly accurately pinpointed using astrology. And 200 years ago, only 200 years ago, if you were a doctor, if you were a physician, you had to study astrology and you had to have good knowledge of astrology in order to diagnose someone, because what we think of as the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, was also applied to medical terms. They were called the four humors. I'm not even going to pretend I know all of them, but it was I know that one of them was called phlegmatic because for some reason I find it a hilarious word. But there were people that were more fiery and would have more fiery medical complaints. That was like around the stomach. And there were people that were watery, and watery would be more emotional complaints, airy, and so on, earthy. And so the concept of the four elements that remains in astrology to this day was applied certainly to medicine. It had been applied in art for literally thousands of years. So where we are now kind of regathering the spiritual world all around us in astrology and in crystals and in chanting, all of those things, we're kind of rescuing them from oblivion, because hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, they were part of everyday life in different ways. And back in the court of Elizabeth I, obviously she had John Dee, who was her mystic and her astrologer, to advise her about different things. And when I first started being interested in astrology, a friend of mine at the time said, and I still don't know whether it's true or not, but she said that banks and corporations and big organizations will usually have an astrologer on the payroll to help them figure stuff out. And in some workplaces, you still have to fill in an application or covering letter in handwriting. That's because those corporations will pay a graphologist to analyze your signature and to analyze your handwriting. So there is something that perhaps the middle classes are not totally part of, but perhaps within the working class, we can say whatever you want. Who's going to judge us? So we've got all that kind of frothing about. And I know when I lived in Greece, everyone in the village, if somebody was pregnant, would tear out a hair or put their wedding ring on a necklace and check whether it's a boy or a girl. So within working class societies, it was always all right to deal with the mystical. But I'm thinking, well, perhaps the ruling classes also know a bunch of stuff that they're not telling the rest of us, because you can't really disconnect the mystical from everyday life. I mean, you could, but it would be very sad.
It would. And I was thinking about talking to Neil Donald Walsh last week, because I said it was like a dream to talk to him. And I'm just thinking in my head as you're talking about that, all these people that want predictions, and I'm talking about like people who want to go and, contact their loved ones in spirit, and go and contact a medium because they've just lost a loved one. But talking about predictions and, go into a psychic to get predictions. And for me, I think sometimes I'm like, can we let life be a surprise? Can we just let life be as it's meant to be? Like I love having readings. Like I love having predictions, because it just gets me excited and it keeps me going and it just gives me a lot of joy. But I think there's an element of, do it from a place of that. I do it from a place of joy, not a place of like, I need to know because I'm in anxiety and it's, I think
exactly.
Like they say, don't be an emergency meditator, don't go to rock bottom and have to sort your life out. You should still be meditating. So I get readings when things are going great for me,
I think it's true for literally anything in life. If you approach anything from a place of fear, the universe will bring fear back to you. If you approach anything from a place of joy, then joy will be reflected back to you. Now, I've got 4 living children, 4 sleeping children, touch wood, but it was quite the journey to have them. And I experienced a lot of miscarriages and a lot of false starts. And at that time, I was having lots of readings that supported me. And while the doctors were going, it's your age, you can't expect to have a baby, psychics around me were saying, we see you with with lots of babies. Nil to the doctors, definitely one to the psychics. So that really helped to lift me up. But I think that whatever it is, the driving force behind psychic ability or behind readings, if it's God to some people, the universe to some other people, I personally believe that the tarot has its own intelligence that is independent and works by itself. Sometimes I think it will frighten you on purpose in order to light a fire under your bottom. And I'll use that as an example, not for a reading I gave, but for a reading I received, because I think it's very different to observe the world as a recipient to as a working psychic. And it was about this time last year. There were 2 things going on. My youngest son didn't get accepted to the same school as my other children, and so was toddling by himself, 4 years old, toddling by himself to a different school, not understanding why he didn't go to the same school. And I fought it and fought it and fought it. Spoiler alert, I won, but it took a year. So that was going on. That was devastating. It put me in a state of depression. And as you can imagine, when you're in a state of depression, you're doing this work, your entire world sort of works on two different levels. And also, I had had a job interview for like a one-off job, but I really wanted it. Anyway, I was handling the school situation, I think, all right. But when that job came that I really wanted, I was like, no, this is too much. My brain can't handle it. And I went to a friend of mine who I trust a lot and asked for a reading, but it was like a blind reading. I didn't tell him what the question was about. I just sort of asked for the answers. One question about the situation with L. Yeah, so that's all he knew. So that was the initial. And one question, just tell me about the situation with D. D was the company that I interviewed with. And about the situation with L, he said, you just have to get used to this is how it is. And that was the exact thing I needed to not hear, because that made me sort of go fighting. And I was sitting there scribbling, thinking, what can I do? How can I work this situation in my advantage? Because what he told me, I was not having. And I think thanks to that reading, that got me. I don't want to make it sort of too boring and complicated, but I ended up launching an investigation within the school in order to increment the school so that the school will demonstrate to their superiors that they were doing nothing in their power to make it easier for the child. So that reading created a chain of events for me where I was going for it like Boo Boo the Barbarian. I was taking no prisoners. That was one thing. So what he said ended up not being true, but only in the context that I wasn't accepting it to be true. And the situation with the production company. So I interviewed for a job that I thought I was just underqualified for. I can tell you now that it was for one of Jack Osborne's paranormal shows.
Yeah.
Where they just wanted somebody to come and inspect a space. I didn't even know it was Jack Osborne. I just knew it was a paranormal TV show. And I really wanted to do it, but I don't think myself as particularly gifted in that specific field. So I'd had the interview. I asked my friend to give me a little reading, how it's going to go with that production company D. And again, he said, you haven't got it. And I thought, I can live with that. So I sent a beautiful email to the person that interviewed me, just thanking them for not laughing me out of the room and saying, thank you so much for giving me a chance to try and impress you. I'm sure whoever you pick will be amazing. Please keep in touch. I feel so thrilled to have just got interviewed for it. And a day later, they replied, it's actually you that we want. And I'm thinking, was it the email that made it happen? And again, getting that no pushed me into taking action in a way that reversed it. So even though a reading has to be empowering, I think sometimes it's all right to leave it in the hands of the tarot, that if it tells you something that you're not that keen to know, it knows what it's doing. It knows what it's doing. Just like, as a parent, I say to my kids, all your teeth will fall off tomorrow if you don't brush your teeth today. It's a lie, but it's a lie that's meant to instigate something. I think the tarot has the intelligence to sometimes play with you a little bit like that, to just motivate you to get the best out of you. So it was a really complicated story, and I think
it makes sense because it's pushing down the path to help you move forward. So I try and take the path of least resistance, and I think that sometimes when we have readings, we want to try and control everything. I think when we have readings and we get a disappointing answer, say, sometimes I always don't take that as final. Like you said, you can come away from a reading and the person hasn't told you exactly what you wanted to hear, but it was what you were meant to hear, and it does propel you in the right direction. So it, like you said, it's doing its job. It's not all meant to be like positive and happy. It's meant to push you out for action taking.
Yeah. And then, and I think the opposite is also really the case, that if you expect a reading to be really glum, and it ends up giving you the most incredible message, it's such a high. I used to run face-to-face tarot courses, remember the before times, and I had lots of students in London, and I had a course of 4 people and a course of 14 people, and each one would have its own dynamic, and big or small, at the end of each course, the last half hour was dividing them to do readings for each other. And if they didn't divide correctly, I would take the best student to do a reading for me. So if you're watching it and you got to do my reading on the final lesson, that's why. And if you didn't, you're probably second place. And this girl, who later on became a very close friend, in one of the courses, she was pulling the reading for me. And what she didn't know is that the person I used to run the courses with was my partner, because by the time her course started, we'd already split up, but we were still running our courses together. And she said she was very neutral faced. And she said, I can see that there is somebody that loves you very much, but you're not together anymore. And he was listening, and I was like, and she says to me, he watches over you, in a way that was definitely creepy.
Yeah.
And only after she finished saying that and left, and the reading was unbelievable, it transpired that the previous night, when me and him visited another friend in another city, and I left early and I waited for the bus, he also left, unbeknownst to me. He was a little further down the road and making sure that I'd got on the bus. So he was watching over me in exactly the way that she described, that she didn't know. I told her like years later, she didn't know for years. But I was really expecting the reading to be very glum. I'd just been through a breakup. I thought it would be very, very sad. And that message, and the way that she delivered it, and this is somebody who'd only been reading tarot 6 weeks, the way that she delivered it was so uplifting, so empowering, and so accurate. We're not going to how accurate the tarot is, and how insanely it'll specify people, places, job descriptions, companies, dates, hair color, food items. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I'm actually drawn to pull out my deck and shuffle them, and I want to see what I feel, because I've got this deck.
Oh, it's wonderful.
I love the Lightseers, because it's just the artwork for me. I was like, because I was going to get the Rider-Waite ones, and I just like, if anyone's seen them, like, they're just absolutely like, they're just
beautiful, so sensitive.
So I've not held these for a while, so it's weird, because it's like I feel them and like, oh. So if I shuffle them and whatever one comes out, I'm going to look at it and I'll see what I sense, because I don't read tarot for people, like I never have. I've always used Oracle, and I always felt like I needed to be trained in tarot to be a tarot reader. And it's like the same as Oracle. You just need to be able to look at the cards, trust the intuition as you're coming through, and like you said, the picture gives a lot. Oh, 2 fell out. Okay. I'm being tested twice. Okay. So let me just look at these. If any tarot readers are listening and watching, it'd be interesting to get your take on it as well. Because like you said, we're all learning and we see through our perspective. That's key. We see through our own experience and perspective. So instantly with this card, I see moons, that's feminine energy, and I see the black and the white. So expand your thinking from black and white. There's balance there as well. But then there's also the mystical of being under the ocean as well. So I think it's the duality of up and down, left and right, black and white, all that duality we've created. And it's like, it's actually all one. If we didn't know fear, we wouldn't know love. that kind of message. And I love how there's like little sneaky infinity symbols on the shoreline here. So what would you say when you saw that, Inbaal?
Right, so it's presumably the moon. And unfortunately, I'm not a collector, and even when I see a deck I really, really love, I just stop myself unless I absolutely have to have it because I don't want to become a collector. Do you know what I mean? Because that's a whole different thing to being a reader. But the moon is the card of Pisces. And so reflecting things, what you're describing, black to white, femininity, masculinity, day and night, is very much the heart of the message of it. But it's also super appropriate to our conversation because the moon card speaks of psychism, of being able to tune in. And that's why, you know, she's under the ocean. It's silent, but you can pick up everything. And during the time of the full moon, this is where we have the word lunacy, where it comes from. The moon influences us as women, people who menstruate, and we've got those jackals howling at the moon. So the moon is very central, and the moon transforms all the time. That's another theme that we're talking about in this conversation, the theme of transformation.
Yeah, I love it. So if I look at the second one that fell out, this one's probably a bit tougher for me, but when I see it, it's quite funny this came out because this symbol is part of my podcast logo. So it's quite interesting how the cards have brought this out. Now, the symbols in the four corners, I mean, you'll see this differently because you're used to reading this, but I just feel like this card is everything. Like, I feel like you are where you're meant to be. Everything's good. Everything, you know, your consciousness is there. It's just tapping into it, and it's the world. So this symbol in the circle, that's part of my podcast logo. So I think that's interesting how the tarot's brought that out as a sneaky little message.
That is incredible, but it's literally what the world means. It is everything. It is everything. It's the ultimate, it's the end point. Of course, every end point is a new beginning point.
Yeah.
And the four symbols in the corners are the four elements.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I love how like happy she is. Look how like she's just so like happy, and yeah, so it's interesting how I'm so happy that tarot brought out that symbol that behind you. If you can see it, guys, the symbol, it's like, what's it called, the symbol now? It's like the
lotus.
It's the grid, isn't it? It's like a grid, like a mandala grid. And I put that on the podcast because I just love the symbol. Everything intertwines, and I think that's what life is about. Everything's intertwined, and everything, you meet people at the right time, you read the right book at the right time, you start a job at the right time, you know. And I think that's what that. So I think, yeah, I could read tarot for people, I think. And even when you get the cards that have like more of a darker message, there's quite a lot of cards in that deck where she's in like a ball and there's like crows above her, like, and I feel like that's because you're in your head. It's like everything's pecking at your head, like you're too much in your head, you're too much overthinking. So it's like, as I become more knowledgeable and you know, connect to my inner wisdom, reading tarot is much easier because the intuition and the messages come through so much quicker.
Exactly, because the tarot is a system in the one way, but on the other hand, tarot is an antenna that allows you to channel your own inner knowledge. And if the tarot was only a system, then computerized tarot readings would be a thing, and they absolutely are not. You need the practitioner, you need the reader, you need the person with a life experience, and you'll find that as a healer yourself, but you'll see that as a reader, that people who come to you are people who are just about to embark on a similar journey to one that you've already graduated from. So I come from a very big and complex family, so I kind of specialize in family feuds, because a lot of people that come to me will come from sorry, my little cold has caught up with me, will come from perhaps mixed marriages, when they're from one culture, the partner's from another culture. Obviously, I deal with a lot of people that go through an infertility journey that then becomes a fertility journey. And I've always dealt with complex love stories because my love stories have been complex. You'll see now for you that you've been through a huge, a huge geographical move. You will see that more and more people will come to you who want to find the strength to go through that geographical move. And because of that, that's why I've been so convinced that the tarot has its own intelligence, its own soul. I don't have a better word for it. Its own soul, its own way of relating to the world, and its own way of being.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that about geographic location. Like, it's one thing I love helping people with, because I was separated from Chris for so long, 18 months apart, and navigating that in itself through a pandemic. So I didn't have the luxury of freedom as much as I do now. So having a long distance relationship, which was out of our control, the added pressure of he couldn't leave, I couldn't leave, and I think what we endured and what we overcame is like such a huge thing for us to teach and help people with, because I was just chatting to a lady this morning about it, and she wants to bring me on her podcast to talk about the separation, and even going into the intimacy around separation, physical separation, when I love touchy-feely, I love hugging, I love kissing, I love just being with my person. And it's interesting because you don't say you don't forget, but because it's happened now and we've just got married and things are great, moving back into how that was as Pip in that time. When I think back to 2 years ago, when we were separated for 18 months, like, that's not exactly a short amount of time, it's a long time. And just to overcome that and what we learned as a couple through that, I think there's so much that Chris and I can help people with, in long distance relationships, in relationships in general. How do we keep a relationship alive for 18 months on the opposite sides of the world, where some people can't even keep their relationships alive where they live in the same house? So it's that duality again of how we make it work. And it's a big topic for me. Yeah. I love talking about it.
Yeah. And also, as a reader, I find that, sometimes the messages that I refuse to listen to from the universe will come to me through my clients. So if there is something that I refuse to accept, I'll have a client that will have a similar problem to it, and I'll think, oh, that's an interesting coincidence, and then two more on the same day, and and then I'll be like, okay, guys, I am now listening, because the universe will communicate stuff to you one way or another. It doesn't matter how interested you are.
Well, yeah, and I find that when you do readings for people, there is that similar, they're going through similar things. I say to all my friends and clients, they're going through something right now, whether it's like, they're stuck in the career, or, the love life's gone a bit crap, whatever it is. And I say, you're not the only person. Like, you will literally, like, there's so many people going through what you're going through right now. And it's the similar messages that come up for people. And I think if people could realize that we're all actually going through the same stuff, just in our own way, and how, especially how we've been brought up, our dynamic, our family life, our friends. Like, if I go through something difficult, which I've not had anything majorly difficult apart from missing family. I don't have family around me apart from Chris and my two stepsons.
You're just apart from your person for 18 months. How can you even say, do your ears hear you going, I haven't been through anything particularly difficult?
Yeah,
But
I mean, like recently, like that was a big.
As humans, we're very resilient and we kind of process our own pain. So I'm obviously laughing that you're saying, I haven't been through anything difficult. And then I realized that 10 minutes before I was, sharing about like multiple miscarriages, which at the time was
horrendous.
Yeah. And now it's just part of the jigsaw that makes me me.
Yeah, I say it's like the tapestry. It's all the little threads that make up the tapestry. And like I said, I think the separation from Chris was harder because it was so in the unknown. It was so we just didn't know. And I actually got this message through a while ago. It was when we were still separated. Losing a loved one is easier for me. It was easier for me to lose my granddad in the sense of, not because it was that I was comparing them, but being separated from Chris. I lost my granddad in the August. Didn't have Chris to console me, to comfort me, to love me in a physical sense. But I actually sat in contemplation weeks after my granddad had passed. And I thought, losing someone is like, it's closure. It's nothing you can do about it. It's a physical thing. He's transformed into spirit, where being away from Chris was a total different scenario. It was totally different. It was an unknown. It was a when, why, how. So it helped me to surrender. It helped me to, surrender was a huge thing for me, being away from Chris, not knowing when the borders were going to open, not knowing when we'd see each other again, if our relationship would make it. It was so, just the anxiety I had most days of just waking up, being like another day without him, waking up to like he was 13 hours ahead, sometimes 11, depending on the time of year. And, just reflecting on it. I think that's what I need to do. I need to reflect more on it, I think, because it's been such a whirlwind the last, 10 months of moving here, getting married, family have visited. Is just, I think now it's reflection. Like I've got a bit of the wedding blues, as we mentioned. And I think it's like, I think my soul wants to reflect on, God, how far you've come, and give yourself that pat on the back,
Yeah, and that's your moon card that you pulled for yourself.
Yeah.
Reflecting.
Yeah. Yeah. I've just actually noticed the time. Like we honestly, when we talk, it goes like so quick. I remember when we had the reading, I was like, oh my God, the hour, it's just like gone so quick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
is there
does.
anything
It
else that
does.
you want to share that's been coming up for you with our chat, or do you think it's kind of like,
I think there's never like an end point to any conversation. We could sit and talk until it is nighttime over there and morning time here, and we still won't finish, because the topic that we're looking into is infinite. It is endless. But if anyone feels moved to have a conversation, I'm a very easy person to find online. So just use, I'm sure people will furnish you with the links if you spell my name correctly. And watch out for imposters. You should be able to find me quite easily.
I was gonna say as well, yeah, people can find you on Instagram, Facebook, and definitely book a reading in with you. You've actually given me a lot of confidence to go and actually like use tarot when I'm doing a reading now, because I used to just go, oh, not gonna use tarot, I'll just stick to my oracle decks. But tarot is definitely, like said, it does help you with intuition more, because
It really helps. It's a wonderful tool. And the time that you spend kind of familiarizing yourself with a tarot, not learning it, but kind of assimilating with it, is a time of great transformation for you as a person.
Yeah.
I feel that everything changed in my life in the few years that I was sitting and just doing readings for myself and doing readings. Everything changed. Your mindset changes. The way you view yourself, the way you view the world around you changes, because the tarot shows you all the different aspects of everything, and you see that the world is not flat.
Yeah.
It's a big multifaceted diamond that can work whatever way you want for it to work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, leaving it with a message of people, you have that intuition within you, and you have the innate wisdom to give yourself readings, to give others readings, and you have all those gifts. We all do. It's just trusting those gifts.
Yeah, I believe that. I think that's really, really true.
Yeah, I am going to leave it there, because again, I could keep talking to you for ages and ages, but I will definitely get you back on to talk about different topics. And yeah, so I will put your links to Instagram, to your Facebook, and how to obviously book a reading in with you. And I think if anyone's listening on the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with all your friends and your family. It would really help. And if you watch it on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video and share it with your friends and family. It just really helps to get my message out and to get this out, you know, to help other people. It's a big passion of mine, and I love bringing guests on as well and holding that space for you to talk about your gifts and what you have to bring to this earth as a messenger as well. So I'm very thankful for having you on today, Inbaal.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we got to do this.
Me too. I hope you've enjoyed it, guys. And if you want to chat to Inbaal or myself, any questions, please reach out to us. And I hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world. And I'll chat to you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.